So we're going to speak from a verse in the 4th chapter, text 10. I'll just do an invocation first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So I'll just read the verse. Vitaragabhaya krodha manmaya mamupashritaha bhava jnana tapasa putamad bhavamagataha. Being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Shall we repeat that? Yeah. Being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me. And thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal, and because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. Then they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal. They become afraid of becoming a person again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attained without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all, being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation. They become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately too materially ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their effective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of these three stages of material consciousness: attachment to material life, fear of spiritual personality, identity, and the conception of the void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by a bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of God. According to the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service, Sanskrit, Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha Tabhajana Kriya Tato Nata Nivritishat Tato Nishta Ruchis Tataha Tata Shaktis Tato Bhavas Tata Preman Dukanstiti Sada Kanam Ayam Premna Pradurbhave Bhavat Kramaha. So, in the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachments, attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfection stage of life. In the prema stage there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustration that results in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Om Gyanti Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasnaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatyadi Satayane. So all these three symptoms exist in the beginning of devotional service, especially, and they can exist later on as well also. So what are these three? Can anybody remember what they were? Prabhupada was very, very careful to repeat it 3 times, so that means it's very important. What is the 3 things that people find difficulty when they start to practice a spiritual process? One is
accepting.
Steadiness.
That's one of the stages. Steadiness.
Fear.
Identity. Yeah, we're fearful of individual identity. So why? You know, we're all put. Does anybody want to give up their life? Put your hands up. Doesn't make sense, does it? Nobody wants to do that. But we're fearful of a spiritual identity. But if you notice that, you know, I saw, what's your name? Amanda. I was doing a few books in Lewis. And I didn't even know how to pronounce it. Is it Lewis or Lewis? But anyway, and a lot of the time when you're trying to speak to people about spiritual life, especially when this is a first-class example when you're on the street, is that some people might stop and listen. And if they do, then you start to explain a little, and they say, and you talk about reincarnation, they go, oh no, not again, no. See, one night's bad enough. So that means that, yeah, we want to exist, but, you know, this world is giving us a lot of, and, you know, let's face it, things don't get any better, do they? On that happy note, will you? Now, we'll talk a little bit about the downside too. You know, because what happens is, you know, you're born. When you're born, you're not actually, you're not laughing, are you? When you You know, so we can tell that the baby's not experiencing something blissful, you know. He's not crying out of transcendental happiness. And then, you know, you have to go to school, you know, every day. Anybody remember going to school? Was it a blissful experience? No, it's like torture, then you leave school, yes! Oh yes, now I can enjoy it. And then you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. But you've got some freedom, you know, you've got some money. And you can try and enjoy it, but then after, it doesn't last very long. Then not far down the road you get married. You know, for the first, well, I'll give it 6 months at the most. It's like, it's not bad, is it? You know, it's fresh. But then after that, we really have to knuckle down to married life. So anyway, I think we've said enough. And then you get up. Wait a minute, we've got a bit left yet. We've got the best part to come. You know, then you start to get a few grey hairs. You look in the mirror and you know, you look a little bit different. So you start patching up. And then, you know, you think, waste of time. Yeah, nowadays they have shaved heads, don't they? Because, you know, it covers up the receding hairline. And anyway, and then eventually, you know, you're at 50, and then you're at 60, and then you're at 70. So it's like, you know, the pains don't go away anymore, and you know, you like become a little bit isolated from the rest of the community, a lot of old people, and so it's not a very, you know, nice thing to look forward. Nobody likes to talk about it, do they? So this is why people, you know, they don't want to go through it all again. They you know, they prefer that there's something, you know, actually they prefer that there's nothing afterwards. This is the Buddhist philosophy. Buddhism means annihilating one's existence, merging into the void, becoming a nothingness. And so this is, people become Buddhists because life's, you know, it's just too difficult. Well, there's 2 reasons. What's the other reason? One reason is that life's difficult, they want to give up suffering.
Maybe the other one's because it's blissful, is it? But not non-personal, personal.
It is to do with a person, but somebody they want to forget.
That somebody is more superior than them.
Yeah, that's God. Buddhist philosophy is atheistic. They don't want to actually have to, you know, surrender to somebody also. So these are the 2 reasons. And so therefore they want to merge into a kind of void, it says. And sometimes they take, anyway, that's one. And then anybody got another one of these 3? One is fear of personal existence again. First one is
Material attachment. Material attachment.
Yes. Who said that?
This lady.
Oh, you said it. I didn't see your lips move. Fear of material attachments. Material attachment. So this is obvious. You know, people, you know, I tell you, if you go out and do a few books, you get all the philosophy in a few minutes. It becomes very obvious. You know, some people say, I'm too busy, I haven't got time. They're always in a rush. They're looking for the next object which they can try and enjoy, like that. So, you know, we don't have time for, even in devotees' life, sometimes we get caught up in not having time for what we need to do. Have you ever noticed? It's very difficult to break that cycle, isn't it? So, you know, even in later devotional life, it's good to bear this verse in mind, and then we can counteract those things. And what's the last one? That's an antidote. That's the, we take shelter of that. Free food, yeah. Fear of personal existence. Yeah, it means that we're disgusted with all the different philosophies. Has anybody been in that category where you hear so many things you think, you know, there's too many choices and you just think, forget it. I remember I used to go in, before I joined the movement, I used to go in one pub and there was this person there, as soon as you walked in, he got the chair, you know what I mean? Yes, and he was speaking about philosophy and nobody could tell a word he was talking about. And then later on, of course, I read Prabhupada's books. I thought, wow, it's so clear, so simple. So, you know, when we don't understand something properly, when it's not, it means that the person or the particular philosophy which is being presented is not really so clear. It means that maybe it's not the proper philosophy. Because real philosophy is very, very clear. And when it's presented by somebody who knows that philosophy and he practices that philosophy, then it becomes extremely clear. And so, you know, these books which we're reading now by our founder Acharya, there are difficult parts because we're not used to reading about these things. But generally, the ABC is no difficulty. So then, you know, so spiritual life starts off with Shraddha, a little bit of faith. You know, think, let me give it a try, let me see what this is all about. Then we associate with devotees. And then by that association, has anybody had the cliche, show me a person's association and I'll show you the... Show me the person's association and I'll show you the...
Faults.
The person, yeah. I'll show you. Show me a man's association, I'll show you the man. What does it mean?
Somebody's behind it.
It means that those who we associate with, we naturally take on their qualities. Is that right? Mm. And so when we start associating with those who are practicing spiritual life, we'll start to actually get an interest in it. It's natural, we'll become more attracted. Plus the process itself starts to take away all our things which are stopping us from going forward in devotional service. And then, of course, we may want to take the process very, very seriously. So we take some vows. Okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. And we follow a particular path very strictly. And then we come on to the long stage. This is called in Sanskrit they call an arta nivritti. We see all those things which are stopping us from going forward in the heart. And we start working on ourselves. And then when we get to the end of that period, we become very, very strict about devotional service. You know, it becomes, what they call it, fixed. When we concentrate on something very, very, in this fixed stage, when we really focus, what happens when we become really focused? When we really focus on something in life, like you've been focusing for 17 years, you know, distributing hot chilies and different condiments to go with it, yeah? You become expert, don't you? You get a taste for it, don't you? It becomes really nice, doesn't it? No, we become expert at performing that activity. And there is a sort of an attachment to perform, even though we don't want to do it, we're attached to it. So there's a taste and then an attachment, and that's a really healthy sign when we start to feel some empathy towards devotional service. It's starting now, actually. We don't have to wait for the time when we're completely free from any material attachment. It's starting now. There's some attachment, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So this is a very, very auspicious sign, and it's a very rare sign because how many people take this opportunity? And so we need to encourage ourselves in that way. That, you know, the beginning of what they call ruchi, or a taste for devotional service, is already there. And everybody was dancing. It's pleasurable, isn't it? It's very pleasurable. So why are we feeling like that? Because Krishna's pleased. Krishna's pleased. And so when we carry on performing that activity and keep pleasing Krishna, then gradually we make more and more progress. And then we get the first stage of real devotional service. First ruchi means we become attracted to the process itself. You know, we like to have kirtan, we like to eat prasadam. We don't need to do much about that one, but, and we like to read the books. And that's a real good sign. When we like to hear about Krishna, when we like to hear about Krishna, then Krishna is very pleased. It's just like if there was somebody in the kitchen and they were talking in the background, and all of a sudden you heard your name mentioned. What would you do? You'd be really interested, wouldn't you? I wonder what they're saying. I wonder if it's good. It must be good. So when Krishna, you know, when we're discussing about Krishna, Krishna's in his own abode and he hears somebody, a devotee speaking. He's interested in the devotee. Who's speaking about me? And then the next stage is bhava. So bhava is, what does bhava mean? We've all got bhava. It's the first stage of love of God, you're right, but it has another specific meaning. It means, it starts with, nearest English translation. These words are Sanskrit words, and they have a very deep.
Use the mic.
So these, much better, isn't it? So these words in Sanskrit, they're, you see, there's words in Sanskrit which we don't have an equivalent for in English. It's such a big language. And so bhava has quite a few meanings, but the nearest one we can get in English is it's like mood. We have a particular mood. Yeah? So we all have a particular mood. And so bhava means that mood is in service to Krishna. Just before we get to bhava, actually, we've said when we get a taste, we're attracted to we like the activities of devotional service. Yeah. So then the next one, we start to actually not become just attracted to the activities of devotional service. Now Krishna starts to come into the picture. You know, he's been on the side. We've been performing devotional service, and sometimes, you know, we acknowledge Krishna. But usually we're just fixed on, you know, getting whatever needs to be done, you know, done. But then we start to become attracted to actually serving God, to serving the Supreme Lord. So this is all in the Madhurya Kadambini, very nice book. You should take time to read this. It'll encourage us a lot in devotional service. And then we come to the stage of bhava, where, you know, that attraction for serving Krishna becomes very, very strong. At the stage of the previous stage of Shakti, there's a nice part in the Madhurya Kadambini. It's telling you about the life of somebody, his daily activities, the way he thinks, the people he meets, how he speaks. And then the next one is bhava. It explains how Krishna's really in the picture now, but he's not present before us. He's in the mind, or it's called spurti in Sanskrit. He's sometimes in the mind. And towards the end of bhava, he's always in the mind. We're seeing Krishna, you know, the television of the mind, the mind's eye they call it. We can see something in our mind, can't we? We can imagine it or we see it. So we're seeing Krishna like that all the time. And, you know, that's when we start to be not of this world. We're in it, but we're not of it. We're performing activities and they're connected always to Krishna. And then the next one is when we see Krishna directly. This is prema. In bhava, there's something holding us back. We haven't quite got rid of what we need to get rid of. So Krishna doesn't appear. He comes in the mind. But in prema, he comes directly. And it says that, you know, the devotee is in two states of mind. He's sometimes very, very blissful because he thinks he's going to see Krishna. And sometimes he gets a glance of Krishna. Just like Lord Chaitanya, when he was on the beach at Jagannath Puri, he was looking for Krishna. And then he saw Krishna in the distance. And he started running over the sand dunes. And all the devotees were like, where are you going? And when he got there, he's just going to, you know, embrace, and Krishna disappeared. And then he went into a swoon. And he was so disappointed. So in the beginning of prema, one's like that. It's just like we can imagine with, a sweetheart. This is the nearest thing in the material world. We've just missed our sweetheart. We feel very, very depressed. Well, this is much more than that. And so then Lord Chaitanya was disappointed. Then all of a sudden he saw Krishna in the distance again, and he started running over the sand dunes. And this was going on for quite a while in the middle of the night. And so at some point, why is Krishna appearing like that? What happens when that happens? Yeah, our desire to see becomes increased. Krishna's priming us. Does anybody know what the word priming is? You get somebody ready, you charge them up, you prime them. He's priming us. So that, and then at some point, our desire to see Krishna breaks through any attachment to the material. We just want to see Krishna and nothing else. And at that point, Krishna appears. But he appears first by sight. And Krishna is so beautiful that, in this material body we can't keep our consciousness, we just see Krishna and faint. And then Krishna wakes us up by his voice. He says, "Get up, my dear devotee. Try and experience me to your full satisfaction." So when the devotee just comes around, he hears Krishna's voice, and he faints again. And then the next thing is the aroma of Krishna's body. Krishna's person can satisfy all our senses. And when we come round here and we smell Krishna's aroma, again we faint. So, and then the next one is that Krishna's touch. Krishna lifts us up. He says, depending on what relationship we have with Krishna, the touch is different. To a friend he'll embrace, like that, you can imagine. And then the devotee, of course, what does he do? He faints. And then the next one is called Odarya. This means Krishna's fullness, well, nearly Krishna's fullness. And he shows all his opulences at once. We can see Krishna, we can smell Krishna, we can hear Krishna, we can touch Krishna, but it's just too much. It's described, it's like we don't have chataka birds in Brighton, but we can imagine a little robin. It's like this big, yeah. There's a little bird called a chataka bird, and this bird is a devotee, and he'll only drink when water falls from a cloud. He won't drink anything off the floor. So this is like a devotee. We're going off the point now. We'll stick to the point. And so it's like a chataka bird. It's got a beak about that big. How much water can you get in there? One raindrop and it drowns the bird, and he gets a little bit left in his beak. And so it's chucking it down with rain, and this bird's trying to catch all the rain. He says, so that's how the devotee is trying to experience Krishna. There's just so much to experience, but he cannot experience Krishna. So then what does Krishna do? He feels sympathy for the devotee, and then his compassion, it melts his heart seeing the devotee trying to, have a relationship with him, but he just can't. He hasn't got the facility. So his heart melts in affection, and then he gives the devotee the ability to experience all these things at once. So, devotional service, it's worth practicing. We see so many people after so many goals. What are those goals though? What's the result of those goals? Can anybody remember one good result? If we think about it, there's no good results, is there? We lose everything ultimately. To the degree, if you want to enjoy this world, what do? We really get into it. No? That's what most people do. But if we want to really enjoy this world, what do?
Forget it all. Forget Krishna, forget all.
Yeah, that's one way we can try. But Prahlad Maharaj says, if we want to enjoy this world, don't try to enjoy it. Because the more we try to enjoy it, the more we'll suffer. Can you imagine, think about that. Do you think that's true? The more you become attached to something in this world, at some point you've got to let go of it. So it'll be, the more you're attached, the more painful it will be. So, in another part about devotion is practicing this detachment. In our scripts it tells us what things to try and avoid. We're not going into detail about that, but we're practicing just being satisfied in nearly any condition. A devotee, he has got one thing to take shelter of, and that's Krishna. If whatever situation we're in, if we remember Krishna in that situation, we'll be happy. So the conclusion of this particular verse, and not only this verse but the conclusion of all the Shastras, that we should always endeavour to see Krishna in every situation. Is that possible? Is it? Are you sure? What if something bad happens?
It can be difficult. It can be very difficult.
It can be difficult, yeah.
I mean, someone today will be trying to have a fight with me. Just things like this happen. It's easy when things like that happen. Everything goes out of your head.
How would you see that in a Krishna conscious way? What's the way to see it?
He was in a disturbed state.
Yeah, but from your own point of view, forget about him. How do you see that in helping you?
Well, to try not to fight, basically. It's a lesson for me not to get caught up in what was tormenting him.
There's one verse in the Bhagavad. Tatenu kampam susamikshamano punjana evatna kritam vipakam vidvar vapurbe vedam namaste jivete yo muktipade sadayabhai. And it says that one who, he just accepts whatever situation Krishna sends, or he accepts whatever karma he's got coming to him, he doesn't complain. He sees this as, the last time he'll have to go through any more karma. Now we're engaged in devotional service. So he just accepts whatever comes, and he carries on performing devotional service. This is when, if a person can develop that outlook in life, then it becomes his rightful claim to go back to God. Dayabhai, just tolerate. Remember Krishna. Krishna's sending this for a reason. I may not understand it at the moment, but in due course Krishna will give me the realization. I'll benefit from this situation. And what we're going to do to go back to God, what's the essence of this verse?
It's to stop blaming.
Yeah, that's one thing. What another one?
Take on the responsibility and go.
Take on the responsibility, that's another good one. And there's another one. Dayabhak is a Sanskrit word, and they use it in law. When somebody's got an inheritance, they'll say Dayabhak. The eldest son automatically, because his situation has been the eldest son, will inherit his father's property, right? After the father dies. So what does this son have to do in order to inherit his father's property?
Stay friendly.
Eh?
Stay favourable.
To his father?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is there.
He just has to stick around.
Yeah.
Yeah, stay alive.
He has to stay alive. Is that right?
He has to stay alive.
Yeah. Longer than his father.
Stay alive.
So in devotional service, we have to stay alive in devotional service. We have to be that determined that we're going to do whatever's necessary to carry on for the rest of this life. That's our determination. We're going to associate with people who are going to help me in devotional service, and I'm going to avoid the association of those who are going to be detrimental to my devotional advancement. And I'm going to follow the processes, the Supreme Lord has designated through his spiritual masters. And that means staying alive in devotional service. It may not always be that we're necessarily as happy as we want to be, but that's just our karma wearing off. It's just our misunderstandings wearing off. You know, if this guy comes to me and he starts threatening me, you say, "You're just an instrument of my karma." Yeah, it's like this. It's like this. Okay, we've got some bad karma to come. It's just like a postman. He comes to the door and he's got a bad letter for us. And he gives us a bad letter, we open it and we see what it says and we look at him and we blame him. Yeah. And we start chasing him down. Is that very intelligent? So, you know, somebody comes to us and gives us a hard time. He's just the postman. He's just delivering our karma. It's nothing to do with it. So, you know, it takes a lot of intelligence and endeavour to actually develop this mentality, because, you know, our senses are so, you know, this world is so illusory. We always see the immediate. Why is this person doing this to me? Why this, why that? But then we have to be a little bit intelligent. You know, oh, wait a minute. Yeah?
We're talking about the letter as an example. And because it's karma, because we can associate it with karma, then maybe we can also, because we've obviously done a similar letter at one time for this to come back to us. So therefore, we can pray to Krishna to say how sorry we are that we would have hurt somebody and caused this.
Yeah, we should think like that. We should think, you know, I've done this to others.
Yes, and therefore it becomes healed on a different level between Krishna. Is that?
Yeah, that's first class. We don't blame. A devotee is very brave. He owns the situation and takes responsibility for the situation. And when we do that, then we're safe. Krishna will help us. We don't blame anybody else. And that's very hard to do. It's very hard to do.
We're encouraged to pray for protection. We've even got Krishna in a personification of protection of Nishinga. So it's almost kind of contradictory that we should accept everything because it's karma, but equally we're begging to be freed from that. Equally, it seems like a contradiction. How would you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, we're not pacifists. We don't, you know, when it's raining, you know, you put an umbrella up or you put a rain mat on. You're going to get wet anyway, even if you go out in the rain, if you go out for it long enough. It's not going to really protect you completely. But we're making an endeavour to stop ourselves from getting wet. So in devotional service, we don't let everything happen to, you know, we just don't walk into things. But we do try and avoid, and, you know, if we've got the discrimination, make a choice what to do in that situation. So that's there. We have to deal in the material world. But we don't get, but we understand behind all this what's really happening. You know, if you know that somebody's going to be waiting for you around that corner, he's going to give you, you know, he's going to threaten you, you go the other way, you know. And if it's a karma, he'll go the other way. But yeah, we have to use an intelligence. We avoid difficulty. We have to. The other point, the main point here is that we have to look after this body and we have to look after this mind. This is a precious vehicle for self-realization. And not looking after it and putting ourselves into difficulty or allowing ourselves unnecessary difficulty is not really Krishna consciousness. We avoid difficulty. But when it comes, we take it. If you're in a situation where you can't avoid it, you have to accept it. Of course, it depends how advanced we are. If we're like Prahlad Maharaj, he was 5 years old, and you know, he was fearless of his father. And his father sent all his demon friends to kill him. And they tried to kill him in so many ways. and he just completely depended on Krishna. He didn't try to defend himself, but he had that faith, and nobody could actually hurt him. So I say that's the reality, is that Raki Krishna Marike, Mari Krishna Rakike. If Krishna wants to kill us, there's nothing anybody can do about it. And if Krishna wants to save us, there's nothing anybody can do to kill us. That's the bottom line. Like Dayananda Swami, a very elevated soul. He wanted to take his own life because, he thought he was offending Lord Chaitanya, and he thought, this body is very offensive to Lord Chaitanya. I better just actually commit suicide, then I can't offend him anymore. But Lord Chaitanya, he's omniscient. He knows what we are thinking even before we do. And he could understand the mind of Dayananda Swami. He says, what are you thinking about doing? He said, this body is not yours, it's mine. And it's meant for my service. I've got so much to do through you. You take that out of your mind completely. Okay, anything else? Gataraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanandi.
His Holiness Dayananda Maharaj ki jai.